Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mindset Rx series of the Alpha Movement podcast. On today's show, I'm joined by Erin Mackenzie, also known as Erin Carafo. Erin was brought to my attention when her husband Brian Mackenzie of Power Speed Endurance, XPT, and now Unplugged fame mentioned in passing that no one, I quote, no one can outsuffer her, end quote. Erin rode for the United States and won Olympic gold medals in Beijing and London. As well as talking about embracing intensity and the techniques Erin used, we also discuss how to deal with the transition of elite athlete to, well, not being an elite athlete. On top of this, Erin talks about her approach to hardship. It really is great to hear from someone who has competed at such a high level and who has such a clear perspective as well. What I find super interesting is that Erin says she never absolutely loved rowing, but she was good at it. So she found that passion and she found that drive to push hard. It was a super enjoyable show all around. Before we get into the show though, a tiny touch of housekeeping. First, be sure to Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. It helps the podcast grow as well as my ego. Next, I'm touring the UK with my Mindset Rx seminars where I teach how to embrace intensity with the techniques that the best in functional fitness use. On top of this, I teach you about consistency, generating the self-belief, which will help catapult, which will catapult your progress athletically. In short, I set you on your way to acquiring the champ's mindset in a 3-hour seminar. If this sounds like something you could benefit from, and by the way, it is, then head over to mindsetrx.squarespace.com/seminars to check out the full list. In terms of the UK, over the next few months, I'll be heading to Liverpool, Swansea, Stoke-on-Trent, Braintree and Essex and Middlesbrough, and also probably back to London and maybe looking at Netherlands as well. And where else? Newcastle is probably going to happen as well. If you enjoy the show, let us know on the socials. Now I bring you a fascinating conversation with Erin Mackenzie. Hello and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom.
So I think it's probably a good idea, because I'm interested actually how you phrase this, to give us a bit of a background as to who you are and how you define yourself now.
Yeah, I thought you were going to ask me, is it Erin Carafo or Mackenzie, or it's all the above, which is actually kind of, I guess, a way of where I am right now. You know, when I was competing, I was single. Erin Carafo is my maiden name. And so I was a rower on the U.S. women's national team for a bit over 6 years. I was on the team. I was rowing for about a decade. But during that time, I was lucky enough to jump on a team that was pretty darn dominant. And we broke the streak of the Romanians winning the gold medal. I think they had it for like 24 years or something, ridiculous. But so we won the Olympic gold in 2008, and then had to go back for another one to make sure it wasn't a fluke. And so we won again in 2012. And then now, after a couple years after I retired, I got married to my beautiful and amazing husband, Brian Mackenzie. And so now I am Erin Carafo Mackenzie. And so now this new phase of life is transitioning from being a professional athlete to, just a regular, I don't know if citizen is what you want to call it, but, contributing, working professional, and trying to kind of make the segues of what I learned, on the field or on the water for me, into the working life.
Nice. So the way we were introduced, or the way I thought about this would be a good podcast to do, is Brian said to me, my wife, she can outsuffer anyone. Why do you reckon that is?
Oh man. Yeah, that's gonna kind of throw me under the bus or put me up for a challenge for a couple people. You know what? I honestly think it started with my mentor. I met him in 2006. I was on the brink of, actually it was 2007. It was the year before my first Olympics, and I was struggling to even make it. I'm an undersized athlete for a rower, and my brother basically said, "You're too skinny and you don't have a butt. So we need to get you some strength and conditioning. And so he reached out to a guy by the name of Kelly Starrett, who has become a big name in strength and conditioning. But at the time, he was still in PT school and just had his first kid and was sleeping like maybe 3 or 4 hours a night. But he took me under his wing and, he taught me a couple things about position and fundamentals of movement, but most importantly, he helped me with my mindset and would reinforce every time I talked to him that no one can outsuffer you. And, I've always kind of been a competitive human. I grew up again with an older brother. And so it was always whatever I had to do to play with the boys. Like, you can't cry, you can't change the rules. There's no special circumstances for girls. It's either you want to play or you don't. So I had that good foundation, but I think it really got brought out, when I met Kelly, and he would repeatedly tell me over and over and reinforce, just sit on the line, and look across and realize that, it's going to hurt for everybody, but you can suffer better than anyone else. And so with that, I do think it got me really far in athletics, but it's actually, we can get into it a little bit later, but there's also a downside to it too. Suffering is not necessary for all of life. And it's actually not it's not a friend of efficiency either. So yeah, no, I think that's pretty much where that, suffering came from. And I don't know. It's kind of, if you make it your home, it's not so scary.
I love that. Wrap that up there. That little phrase there was excellent. Thank you. Do you remember how you were feeling before you met Kelly? Were you frustrated with how it was going, or is that a leading question? Yeah, no, it was, I was constantly getting injured. And I think, maybe that was part of my suffering, my inefficient suffering, if you will. I was just doing everything. In rowing, the motto is you just, the harder you work, the better you get. And so that's what I was doing. I was doing extra of all this, rowing. And I tore my QL, which is kind of a weird thing to do. It's that major muscle that basically supports your spine. That's the first time I heard of that.
Yep. With every injury, you can feel it coming a mile away, but you just keep on pushing through. Got all the herniated discs and bulging discs and all that stuff. That's, obviously a dime a dozen with rowers. But then I had a long streak of breaking ribs, either 1 or 2 a year. And these are stress fractures, and just come from basically, your shoulder being out of position and relying on the stabilizing muscles. And those get tightened down on your rib cage, and on the inside, you have your diaphragm and your, respiratory system pushing on the inside. And so there's no room for your ribs to bend and, absorb force. And so they just stress fracture. So that was, that was my, my life before I really met Kelly. And actually, to be honest, I still got injured after, but it was a lot of unnecessary pain, because I thought that was just what work was pain.
Yeah. And instead of what?
Instead of fun, instead of, kind of finding something to enjoy, and kind of like I said, make suffering your home. I actually, instead of making it a painful process, I started to enjoy it.
Nice. I love that. That's perfect. That's exactly what I try and do with all my athletes. So that's awesome that you've encapsulated that there. how did Kelly begin working on your mindset then? Like you mentioned that you like just saying, oh yeah, you can out suffer people, but I've never heard him described as that kind of mentor role before, because all I see is the mobility ward, that side of it. So it's really interesting to hear. How did that mindset stuff come about?
Yeah, he actually, his wife and everybody who helps create his schedule will probably want to kill me for this, because I mean, I think right now he would probably be the most expensive mentor you could ever get. That's why he doesn't really mentor anyone anymore. But yeah, no, I think everybody wants his advice on their pain patterns. How do I move, or how do I stretch? And I think it was just, again, perfect timing of where he was in his life too. Like, he was still very much a student and going through a lot of suffering. And I assume maybe this is what he was telling himself. I just hung out with him and his wife last month. And they're, getting 8-9 hours of sleep. Their kids are now like teenagers. They're grooving. They take like month-long vacations and check out because they have a whole staff. So, I think it's a different, and by all means, like, they've worked they still work their butts off. But I think that's probably where he was probably in that kind of building phase of his life as well. Mm-hmm. So I just was super fortunate to come across a human like that, that, even when someone tells you something that you don't quite believe in, you're like, oh, they don't believe that. But for him, like, he made me believe in myself. I didn't care if he actually believed it or not. He just repeated it so much, and with such there was no doubt in his mind. He's like, yeah, you can outsuffer him. Like, it was, and you can do this. And there wasn't a lot of talk around it of why. It was just statement and silence, which I think is more impactful than a bunch of words anyways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Were there any particular phrases like that really stuck in your mind? And how did your self-talk change as well between... Actually, let's start with this to ramble on. How was your self-talk before, and how was it after?
Yeah, this is digging in like I guess it was a decade ago. If I can remember, like in college, I was fortunate enough to jump on a really good team there too at Cal Berkeley. Over in California. And I remember being inconsistent. There were some times where I would just be like, I would just think it was, I grew up in a family that watched a lot of baseball, and there's a lot of superstition there. So I just thought that was sport, is that, some days you have it, some days you don't, and if you, wear the same socks, or you like, turn around to the left 10 times and then, do a push-up, then you're going to do well. And so I thought it was a lot was out of my control. And so I believe that was kind of like my novice years of just kind of being like, wide-eyed and just being like, well, hope this goes well. There's not much. I'm just going to do these things that I can control. Like, and I really hope they work out. Versus once I started becoming more successful, it was more of a statement. It wasn't a hope. It was more of a statement of like, this is going to work out regardless. I'm going to make this work no matter what. And I believe that, you can, in rowing, we do a lot of, we don't actually do too many 2,000 meter pieces, which is kind of odd because that's the competing distance, but we do a lot of 6,000 meter pieces and tests. And, they take around 20 minutes or so, and that's a lot of time to think and have a lot of self-talk. And I think that became my favorite test, just because you had so much time to turn it around. You know, if you were feeling bad for 500 meters, that wouldn't make or break the whole test. And so I just remember, and it definitely helps having other people around that are going through the same thing with you. But I remember having consistently PRs and tests that I did better and better, even though they were like, 3 weeks later, I probably didn't have that much better physiology, but it was, hey, I've been training. What can I do? What can I show for this improvement for the past 3 weeks? And I didn't want to regress. And so it was always just, can I make this hurt anymore? And becoming, curious that way versus I hope this works. It's like, oh, do I have any more? Is this as hard as I can go? And then ultimately the ability to just turn off and feel. And that really doesn't come until you're tired, at least for me.
Okay.
I think that's like that flow that is so popular, of a topic. I think some people can hit it right away, depending on the sport they're in. If you're in an adventure sport, I think that's why it's so sports. I think it's addictive because you really only get there until you get tired.
Sorry, I lost you there. I'm just gonna stop your video.
Get tired.
Sorry, can you hear me right?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you there. Just you started talking about flow state. I'm going to come back. There you go.
Okay.
So, sorry, can you start about flow state again, please?
Yeah. So, actually, I haven't really even thought about it this way. I mean, but I think that have you ever read The Rise of Superman?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh, it's a good one. The Stephen Kotler, and he just explores flow and athletes. I believe it's predominantly athletes and also mostly risk-taking adventure sport athletes because they have, reportedly higher occurrences of this flow state because you have to, your life is on the line, and so only things that matter are very first and foremost in your mind. And so in endurance sports, I think either, it creates the beast or the beast is attracted to endurance sports because flow state really only comes towards the end. When you've tired yourself out so much that's where the piece is. And that's why I love those 6Ks. That's why I do still love really long endurance pieces because that's really the only time I can find that flow. Or for me, it's silence and not self-talk anymore. And I think that's kind of what we're all kind of looking for is just how to get to that state of being versus thinking.
Mm. Did you ever find anything kicked you into that state a bit sooner?
I've tried going harder sooner. And that, give or take. But yeah, I think it, obviously the shorter the piece, the more, is on the line. But, for me, it really is a long distance game. I have a lot of patience. And obviously here's the downside, a lot of capacity to suffer. Mm-hmm. And so for someone like my husband, why he's just such a phenomenal student because he is so sensitive to pain and feeling. He's almost the exact opposite. But he doesn't like it like every normal human being really. So he learns from it though, to not repeat the same mistakes. Now with suffering, you repeat the same mistakes a lot because you don't mind the pain. I think that I haven't quite found a hack, if you will, for getting into that flow state sooner. Because like I said, I've tried to go out harder, do adventurous, risky sports. And if anything, it makes my mind kick up even more. I'm open to any tips and tricks.
Have there ever been any times in particular that have come out where that capacity for suffering has proved itself to be a negative thing?
I think currently I'm realizing that is a pretty bad model for working and running a company. Because again, you aren't efficient. You're willing to stay up. There is really no tangible finish line. And of course you can always make more measurable and, goals, but the difference between, doing a race, a 2,000 meter race every 4 years. Actually we did it every year as well at World Championships. But having that tangible of a goal, it's like, hey, there's 2,000 meters. You're going to, do it in 4 years. And, how you get there is your choice. With business, it's like, it's so open-ended, for me still. And the harder I work, it does not make the company go well, or does not make the team go better. I think that suffering does not help. And again, I think it also, I found it in sports as well as the injury rate. I definitely got injured a lot more than the normal bear, because I was just willing to go through whatever amount of pain. And so it's hard to determine what was the good pain, what was the bad pain. I just went red is what Brian calls it. It's kind of like our pit bull who just ran across the lawn over here after, she's 9 years old, and if you see her walking around, she can barely walk. But then when there's a ball or somebody, it's like she just goes red, and she just jets off and can't feel anything. So, I think suffering, having the superpower of being a good sufferer, has the downside of not being able to feel as much and adapt.
Nice. That makes so much sense. I'm guessing from the fact that you said 6,000 meters was like your favorite test, that 250, 500 meters would be less favorite. Is that right or not?
Yeah, no, it's funny because I did all those like genetic tests,
Mm-hmm.
Where they measure, are you fast twitch, slow twitch, and more you get into that, it's way deeper, but it also tells you, what your diet should be like. Well, anyways, it told me that I should be a very powerful, fast twitch athlete.
That's interesting.
But across the board, in the top women's rowers, I was consistently on the bottom for these short, powerful pieces like 250, 500 meter. It kind of sucked, but it was just crazy. It just felt like there wasn't enough time for me to get to a place where I could turn off my head.
And how did you approach those sessions?
The short pieces?
Yeah.
The short pieces, I tried a little bit of everything. Tried to get angry. I tried to be strategic. I think the times that I did the best was just when I was actually tired. I obviously had less confidence with those because of the consistent results that I saw. I would do whatever I could. I actually added more strength and conditioning, more so strength, not conditioning. I don't think we needed as much help with conditioning, but strength pieces, deadlifts, sumo deadlifts, squats, either reps, single, 1 to 3 reps, to help increase that. And so I would be, super strategic about it and try to change that. But, from talking, to my buddy, actually our friend, Dr. Andy Galpin, he studies muscle types and muscle fibers, predominantly. And it's just fascinating because I'm probably going to butcher it, but the way I understood it is that everybody, sure, they have this DNA that is, skewed towards one way. You're born with something, but it also, that just is a protein, right? It has to be exposed to the environment to be realized. And I think what I was exposed to mostly was long, slow distance. Mm-hmm. And so this DNA, the environment skewed me over to becoming a long, slow distance athlete. The more you train those muscle fiber types, the harder it is to switch over. But the cool thing is if you detrain, you now have an open ability to retrain that muscle fiber type again. You'll still have that skew over to one side, but you will have much more possibilities versus being, a decade-long rower that does, 20K a day. Your hopes of being a strong, powerful athlete it's going to be really hard to change that muscle fiber type over. So that kind of gave me solace and makes me feel better now that I can't train nearly as much. I'm like, I'm just going back to the drawing board on my muscle fiber type. That's all I'm doing. I'm just detraining on purpose.
Did you ever have any work with sports psychologists?
I did. A little bit. I'm trying to think. The first time I talked to one, I think was in 2010. Just, the way our coach did it and why I think the women are still successful is the U.S. women's rowing team is still successful is that he just made everybody go back to the drawing board. And if you are one of the top athletes, he actually has you retest and row with, not necessarily the bottom, but like the middle athletes. So he wouldn't do you any favors to make it on the team the next time. And so I was just having a hell of a time with this pair partner that I just couldn't figure out. I couldn't make her go. And that was actually my specialty, was the small boats. And so I reached out to try to find a sports psychologist to, obviously fix her problem, which in sports psychology or even any psychology or any mindfulness, you realize that, nobody else is the problem except for you. So, that was helpful. I think I, went for a couple months and then we won a race and I was able to switch up pair partners. So it worked.
Okay, nice. How, are there any techniques that you still remember from that, or like phrases or anything that might be useful for other people?
Yeah, it was, it actually had something to do with breathing, which is ironic because, exactly. My husband's so deep down the rabbit hole with that, but, it was pretty much just exhaling the bad, inhaling the good. So you want to fill your head up with good thoughts, reinforcement, and then if you have any bad thoughts, you exhale those. And at the time, that really helped. I think that just really helps kind of reset your mind frame. But, obviously, we're all in different spots, and I've tried that recently with business, and it doesn't work as well. But I think that the interesting part about it too, that I've come to find out later, is everybody's so concerned about this VO2 max in fitness and how much capacity you have, which sure, that is a great marker of potential. But what we're finding is that CO2, the ability to process CO2, or the ability to exhale and scrub off CO2, is way more better indicator of performance than VO2 max. Your ability to inhale and get full breath of air, right? How you can process those bad thoughts and get them out is going to be a way better help with performance. And that's just kind of been my conclusion of it all, of like, sure, you can think all the good thoughts you want, but if you can't just kind of let go of the bad thoughts, there's just gonna be a backup.
Yeah, nice. I really like that. That's a really nice analogy.
Yeah.
Were there any other mentors or coaches that provided a strong role in your life other than Kelly?
Yeah. My brother, obviously, he's been there from day one because he's older. Yeah, I was super fortunate to be born into a family that, he's just an open-minded, loving human, and would let me be involved with, whatever sports or games or whatever he and his friends were doing, and would kind of always stick up for me. It's kind of funny as a kid, or not necessarily a kid, but like in high school, when you're like, oh, isn't that awkward? He's only a year older. You can't date his friends. Well, nobody wanted to date me because my brother was so nice. It was like almost the opposite. Everybody's like, oh, because he's a big dude too. They're like, oh, he's so scared of them, he's going to beat him, he'll beat up your boyfriend. And that wasn't the case. He would just be so nice that nobody wanted to like offend him. And so it actually still didn't work out well for me until I, went to college. But yeah, no, he's a very, he's actually the natural athlete in the family. And so he taught me a lot, and, he's probably the best big brother. I'm a little partial, but I've seen a lot of other brothers out there, and he definitely led me along the way. He told me I needed to get my shit together and not be a skinny rower anymore. And he's the one that kind of starts me on the paths, and I listen to him, I think, more than anybody else. And so that helps too. He's just very honest and a good communicator. But beyond that, definitely my husband, Brian, Kelly introduced us. Kelly, my former mentor, introduced us. And it was funny because he was like, I want you to meet my friend, Brian, because I think he can help you out with, your injuries and movement patterns, but you can't make out with him. And I was like, no, like you're introducing me to a coach, like that's just, you just don't do that. I don't know what you're talking about. And I meet him. I think I was down at the Olympic Training Center in Chula Vista, and he was doing a seminar. And so we met up for lunch, and walks in this like hardcore tattooed dude. And I was like, I'm just a, farm girl from Central Valley of California. And I was just like, who is this guy? Like there's no way I would even make out with him anyways. Like, but we just connected, and he, again, he's just so curious and open to experiences, and so I was learning from him tremendously, not necessarily knowing the answer. Like this is a great thing is, he doesn't necessarily know the answer, but he encourages everybody to experiment. And so that has been, a lesson that I'm still learning. And that's like the whole, he has, this unscared, message knuckled on or tattooed on his knuckles. That actually was a word that Kelly came up with. And, it's a funny story, but just a made up word, but it's not necessarily of not being scared. It's the art of dealing with being scared. And so that's kind of the process that, I'm going through right now of like not being afraid to fail, especially transitioning from a professional athlete that, and a rowing athlete, you're getting like, you're batting over 800, you're getting like 80 to 90% of your strokes right at that level. And then so to stop doing that and start doing something that your batting average now goes to about, 100 or 10% of the stuff you're doing right. Like that's pretty hard. So it's basically the art of dealing with failure.
Nice. That's that leads me on to what's happening now and what's the development from this point on.
Yeah, what's happening now is I'm working with Brian, my husband, on a little company called Power Speed Endurance, and he created it probably back in 2006, and it was doing running seminars for CrossFit and pretty much opening up a different way up, a different option up the mountain for endurance athletes. You don't have to do long, slow distance. You can actually train for position first and then add intensity and then volume. And so it rocked the boat, I think, and it still is rocking the boat with a lot of endurance sports. But a couple years ago, I saw the opportunity to start relaying that message to different sports beyond just running. And so obviously rowing's close to home. So I added rowing onto there. And we have cycling. We have, now we have tactical, that was just added, triathlon, all these, sports that, again, you think the only way up the mountain is just to do more of it and more work. Each of the coaches on, in our company now have found out that, sure, that way can work. Not saying it doesn't, but here's another option. And, we've tried both. All of us have tried both because we're like, oh no, so-and-so, Romania does 200K a week, so we should do 200K a week. And, you only really start believing or looking for a different option when you realize it doesn't work for you, especially as you get older. You don't necessarily need as many repetitions. You need just a better skill set, and to treat endurance sports and sport itself as a skill and not just a physiological capacity.
Yeah. So a little extra testimonial for you on this.
Yeah.
I was during my time for military, I was reservist, and I tried the whole go out and run 13 miles with kit on your back and boots. And because my training was up to me, I was just like, oh yeah, just do what everyone else has done. And it took about 3 weeks of that before I was completely fucked. And I was like, I can't, this isn't me. So I went back to Power Speed Endurance book and just extrapolated all of that out and just went, okay, this is the system that I follow. And it worked fantastically. Yeah. It was, whilst everyone else was running probably 30, 40 miles a week, I was doing 6, 5, something like that. So it really, really works. But I'm sure you know that already.
Yeah, no. But it's always good to hear. And it's hard because I I think, I understand it tremendously. Like I was saying before, like I have to get tired before I get to that flow state. And I think that's what those endurance athletes are looking for, is that pain or that long, they have to earn it, you know, they have to earn their mileage, or they have to earn the right to compete, or, with long suffering. But, you know, you can suffer, you can get there quicker. With just dialing up the intensity a little bit. And it's scary, you know? And I think that's the hard part, is again, dealing with the failure aspect of it. Endurance athletes typically don't like to fail. So they don't like doing short intervals, or they pace it out too much, you know, and they don't know where their top end is. So that's, you know, it's always good to hear that other people have tried it. But again, I think, you know, typically our audience comes from those that have tried the other model first and wouldn't want it any other way. You know, like what better motivation do you have than actually feeling some emotion to make you look and search for a different answer?
Yeah. When you're transitioning into that model, did you have any reservations?
I still have reservations. I got 2 gold medals with like a long, slow distance plan. Although the more I coach and the more I dissect our training plan, the more I realized it really wasn't as much long, slow distance as I thought. But we were doing 200K a week on the water, and that's not even counting the hours. You know, granted, we were probably doing 3 to 4 hours in the gym, just doing support work. But it was. Yeah, it wasn't as much of a distance game. A lot of the distance was skill work. Now that I dissect it, before I thought it was just junk miles. And you know, that's the piece that we kind of take out with power, speed, endurance, of like, there is a endpoint and a top of being able to concentrate and having your central nervous system being able to respond to something. Beyond that, you know, you're just practicing suffering, which is a skill, and it is something that you should practice, but not every day. There should be training days, and then there should be mental toughness days, you know? But I think that's where training and also I have to, heed my own advice and work as well too, of like, you know, not every day is a mental toughness day. Sometimes you actually have to try to work on the skill and the efficiency of the movement and what you're trying to achieve.
Nice. Did you have a particular goal you're working for? Because I don't know whether it was like a very tangible thing of, for example, a gold medal, or whether it was a more intangible thing of, this is the kind of person I want to be.
Oh, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that one. I think everybody just assumes that you especially with Olympians, like they're like, oh, you've always, you grew up wanting to be an Olympian, you grew up wanting to be a gold medalist. And I honestly had I grew up with classical ballet. Like I was a classical ballerina for 13 years, almost the first 13 years of my life. And there's no way, if somebody told me I would go to the Olympics when I was like 14 or 15 or even, 20 at that stage, I would be like, you're full of shit. Like, and what, but yeah, no, I walked on, to the team at Cal, and, I think it just kind of naturally evolved, to becoming, at first, I think this is where in college, like I didn't really know what to expect. I just wanted to be better every day. And I think that was probably a good strategy. But towards the end of it, it was literally a curiosity. I think that was my goal. My curiosity was, how fast can I get? How much can I push myself, versus it being like a very tangible thing, like a gold medal. And it's just interesting. I actually watched our race. I think it was a 2008 race last week I did a rowing camp with a couple of my old teammates. And it was so painful watching me on the podium, because I literally got up there and all these girls were crying and they were so happy. And you can see my eyes just like looking around of like, okay, like what's next? Like, okay, we did it. Great. Like, when's practice? And I don't know. At first I was like pissed at myself. I'm like, damn it. You could have put on a better show. And just like, everybody is just like, what does it feel like to stand up on the podium? And for me, like, to be honest, that was not the greatest feeling. Like, I was not, I was I probably was, would not have been happy if I was standing on the side of the podium versus the middle. Actually, I can guarantee that. But it was not the best feeling that I had ever experienced in my training.
So what were the good feelings in training?
The good feelings were, doing something like rowing with a girl that, you just weren't meshing with, and being stuck in a pair for 6 months and you weren't meshing with her, and then, changing something or looking at it from a different perspective and then being successful and winning a speed order. I would say that feeling was way more fulfilling than standing on a podium. Walking into a testing week where you're just like, I'm smashed, I'm just going to do what I can do. And then, being happily surprised just because you're just in the moment. That feeling was way better than standing on top of the podium. And helping a teammate out, figure something out. There's a lot of times I would be put with the new girls who had never had the experience of winning or doing well in races or speed orders or whatever. And helping them click and figure it out was way better feeling than standing up on the podium.
So is that more overcoming potential disadvantages? Is that it?
Yep. I guess that underdog through and through. And that's why I think 2012 was so hard. Is because we were the favorites to win the gold medal again. And I don't envy the girls who are on the team right now, where I think they have over a decade. I think they're going on their 11th year of a winning streak for the U.S. women. And some people do great leading from the front, but for me, I have to have some sort of doubt. There has to be some sort of challenge for it to be interesting to me.
Nice. I can't let this hang in the air any longer, but how did the transition go from ballerina to rower? Oh, isn't that a natural evolution? I mean,
it's funny because and this is, I've had a couple talks, back in my hometown as well, of like, everybody wants their kid to specialize in a sport and be good at something and commit to one thing. But my childhood was pretty colorful, obviously. I, from age 2 to what was it, like 14 or 15, I was dancing. And I don't even remember really what got me into it. I guess my mom just put me in class, and I took to the discipline and the challenge of it. And then I think it was around 14 or 15, I had, the oh so common dancing eating disorder. And basically my dad was like, I'm going to put you in sports. And so I started playing softball and basketball. And my dancing director, I had to do it secretly because the director, didn't want muscly dancers and whatever. And then finally I was just like, forget this. I'm going and playing sports because it gave me the same fulfillment. that I was finding, if not more, with having a team. So yeah, I think dance definitely was a great fundamental foundation for, what do you have? You have rhythm. That helps in the boat a lot. You have flexibility. Yep. Getting into a good position definitely helps. And you have discipline, just showing up every day. And, it is the skill. Oh, there's Brian. It is a skill-based sport. So I think being able to look at those different aspects of it definitely helped. I couldn't think of a better foundation for a rower actually than dancing.
And mental toughness as well.
Yep. Yeah. It's funny because everybody, dancer, the feet were just so messed up. Like, I had toenails removed and blisters every day. But the ironic thing, or not so ironic thing, was, when you start rowing, the same thing happens to your hands. You just get like meat grinder looking hands. And, but it wasn't, I was like, oh, I've seen this before.
Yeah, getting used to that. The juxtaposition of ballet, when it's just the beauty and the elegance combined with those feet. It's amazing.
Well, and that's what they say about rowing too. And why, I wondered this, because I wasn't necessarily drawn to the sport per se. Like, I'm not in love with rowing, but I do think it is a wonderful discipline to train individuals. Some people love watching rowing and the sport of rowing and how it feels and on the water. And, I do, I miss kind of just being outside. But yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I don't know if we'll just go right down another wormhole, but yeah, I think it's interesting sometimes of, people who do well at something are not necessarily in love with it.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Why do you think that is?
I think it's more perspective. I think you can see a situation with more clarity and there's less emotional investment. Like, for example, take Brent Fikowski at most recent games. He's I just finished an article about this on the website, shameless little plug there. But he has very successful relationship. He's got a very bright career outside of CrossFit. And I think it gives you more perspective and it's less attachment to the outcome. I think you've got less resting on it. So yeah. Yeah.
No, and I think that I like that a lot because everybody's looking for their passion and the guidance that everybody's given is like, do what you're passionate about, find, what you love. And there's this guy over here that, in the States that I think the show was canceled, but it was called Dirty Jobs. And it was hosted by this guy, Mike Rowe. And he's an actor, but speaks a lot about not necessarily chasing your passion after watching, or after hosting a decade of people doing these dirty jobs of like, pig farmers, sanitation workers, garbage men. And he's like, these people are some of the happiest people you will ever find. And they aren't doing what they're passionate about, but they're happy. And so I think there's something to that in what you just said. I think that there is some perspective of like not taking it so seriously.
Yeah. Cool. I don't know where to go from there. Actually, what makes a good rower? Like just to take a complete left turn.
Oh, what makes a good rower?
Or athlete in general.
Yeah, I think being somewhat involved in the CrossFit world, I think my definition of an athlete has changed a bit. I think that to be a specialist, you do have to have the sport attracts different types of athletes. Someone who is very successful at CrossFit has a completely different mindset than a rower. A rower, from what I've seen, is or becomes very compulsive, obsessive about one movement over and over and over again, and they find joy in perfecting that movement. Now, trying to make that transition to CrossFit, I think it was 6 months after I retired. I was like, oh, I'm going to go to the CrossFit Games. It made me crazy trying to train all these different disciplines. Like, I was just like, I don't like this. Like, I can't get good at anything. Like, I'm okay at everything, but obviously that makes a great CrossFit athlete. And you're good at that sport. That I think for rowing, you have to be someone that that has to make friends with pain, and B, is okay with doing the same thing over and over again. I think they're just a little bit grittier, because you don't have much of a change of scenery. Whereas in a lot of different sports, like live ball sports or even CrossFit Games, you get a lot of change of scenery. And you definitely can become obsessive about those too. But I don't know. I think for the most part, I think I'm drawn to the difference in mental aspects versus physiology. Because I think, in my experience, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. Sure, if you're, 4'9", you probably aren't going to make it onto the USA basketball team, but who says not? And that's kind of was my theory with rowing. Is it's just a mental game.
Is there anyone who typically embodies that athlete's mindset for you?
Some big names I'll throw out from the rowing world. Teammates that I really looked up to. Eleanor Logan. I'm pretty sure she's retired, but she was in the 2008 and 2012 boat with me, and she evolved as an athlete tremendously. Granted, she is a freak of nature, and she has like these dragon lungs and this whale heart, and just she's freaky. She's 6'3", just strong. But I think those, that's pretty commonplace in the rowing world. But her mental strength was just being able to go to work, and being able to be effective and adaptable. Another name that comes to mind is Kate Burko. I'm sure you guys totally heard of her, but these are like the superstars in my that what I look up to and what I think of when I think of an athlete. She is the true honey badger. She, one time the coach had to pull her off of a test because they logged her heart rate at 240, I think it was. And then she had to go in and have, her heart surgery afterwards. She had some intestinal issues, wanted to come back. She didn't make the Olympics, so she wanted to come back, and she had some intestinal issues and had I guess her intestines were all, oh, that's a turtle. Were all jumbled up. 6 months later, she was on the podium.
Yes.
And so I think it's those types of people that just do and don't talk. That's what I look up to as an athlete. And that's kind of, for me, even though it's not great media and probably why you haven't heard of those names. But for me, that's what I really look at as a successful athlete.
Nice, nice. And final question to wrap up. Is there any resources or books that you'd like definitely recommend to other people, or anything that you've gifted to the most people?
Yeah. Let's see.
I'm guessing Power Speed Endurance is in there.
Oh, totally. Power Speed Endurance, Unbreakable Runner, and Unplugged.
Hey, great.
Yeah, those are all of Brian's books. But, you know, I am fortunate that he's such a good communicator, because honestly, a lot of our conversations end up in there. And I haven't had the cojones to like sit down and write a book, but he's so open and willing to, you know, whatever, I'm just going to put it out there. Mm-hmm. And so I obviously I wasn't around when he wrote Power Speed Endurance, so I won't take credit for that. Hence, there's no rowing in there. But yeah, no, I those books just kind of open up a new perspective, looking at things from a different angle. Other great books, Red Gold, and it's out of print. It's written by a Russian psychologist that dealt with athletes when it was still the USSR. But I believe, you know, the Soviets, they took it out of print. You can probably find it on eBay sometimes still. A friend actually found it in a library and made me, you know, a photocopy print of it. But so look for it. But it's interesting. I found it in 2009, and it's just fascinating little experiments that they used to do with their athletes. And you know, the USSR was a powerhouse, especially in the Olympics. And sure, they did drugs, but drugs are only going to get you so far. Everybody's training hard, you know. And it was the one I remember doing in 2012 was doing something that has no meaning, but just for the sake of increasing willpower and discipline. And it was just do something in the morning and then reverse it at night. And so I would put a water bottle in the closet in the morning, an empty water bottle, and then I would take it out at night. And then if that became easy, you basically move the toothbrush from the right to the left. And just interesting, funny little things like that. I've always, that one's a good one. One that my friend Charles Oxley, who's actually one of our coaches now in Power Speed Endurance, just gifted me was, I'm totally blanking on the name. It's a book about this autistic kid. And they found a way to communicate, 'cause obviously communication is really hard for autistic, people. And so that one flipped my lid too, of we think we're all normal and autistic people are different. But when in fact, what's to say that's not normal and we're just all weird just because we're the majority? Does that make us normal? And do you want to be normal? And I truly believe we're all in the spectrum. Yes. But we just all try to be mainstream and we try to be all normal. And so I'll have to email that title to you, but it was a good read. That's the one that I've actually gifted the most recently because Red Gold's out of print. Nice.
And, do you still do any of those exercises, moving the toothbrush from one side to the other or anything like that?
No, I should. I feel like that, the argument of willpower is finite is an interesting one. Can you grow it? So no, I think, maybe I just might.
Awesome.
Play with it again.
On that note, I'd check out Sam Harris's work if you don't already, on his thought on free will and willpower as a whole. Super interesting. But anyway, that's for another time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Where can people find out a bit more about you?
Power Speed Endurance.
Sweet. Perfect.
All day, all night until I figure out something more efficient.
Do you know the Instagram handles or Facebook or anything like that?
Yeah, it's at Power Speed Endurance, all spelled out. I believe Twitter is PS Endurance. Should probably know that, but we aren't big Twitterers. But yeah, all of it's on the website, Power Speed Endurance. And that's where my home is right now. And not my passion, but my motivation is. So yeah, no, it's fun. It's all about sharing what experiences, right? That's what we're here for. So that's where we're doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for listening to another episode of a Mindset Rx series of the Alpha Movement podcast. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. And I have a little gift for you. I know I mentioned this a couple of weeks back, but if you head over to mindsetrxd.squarespace.com/goal setting guide, you'll have a complete breakdown of how I set goals with my athletes. It's a much more effective way than smart goal setting alone. Also, to get that, by the way, mindsetrx.squarespace.com/goal setting guide. Also, books, The Impossible Art of Consistency and Intensity Tolerance on Amazon. Check them out. I hope you enjoy them. And be sure to check out the Alpha Movement and myself, Tom Foxley, on Facebook, Instagram, and that's pretty much it because I hate the rest of social media. And on that positive note, I'll see you guys soon.